OK, bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue. Bon après-midi. Thank you everyone for coming. Gouverneur Carney va prendre vos questions pour les prochaines 20 minutes. Bien sûr, libre à vous de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. If I could ask you, please state your name and affiliation before asking your question. We have a handheld mic here, un microphone sans fil qu'on peut passer partout. Est-ce qu'on peut commencer avec une question et une follow-up et on va assurer que tout le monde a l'occasion de demander une question. Avec ça, gouverneur, on commence avec Rudy.
Rudy Le Cours, la presse. Bonjour, je voudrais axer ma question sur la mobilité de la main-d'œuvre.
Oui.
Vous identifiez qu'elle est beaucoup plus grande qu'elle l'était il y a quelques années. Est-ce que vous ne croyez pas que pour le Québec, ça pose un problème particulier parce qu'il y a la langue et c'est une dimension qui ne fait pas partie de la politique monétaire, mais qui est quand même très réelle? Alors, c'est plus difficile pour des gens d'Alberta, par exemple, ou des maritimes de venir travailler au Québec, même s'il y avait des jobs dans le plan Nord. Et à l'inverse, c'est plus difficile pour les Québécois d'aller travailler en Alberta s'ils ne parlent pas anglais.
Oui. Premièrement, il faut reconnaître que la flexibilité du marché du travail au Canada, partout, à travers au Canada, et nous avons une des marchés de travail les plus flexibles du monde, chose première. Dans le marché, il y a des différences, bien sûr, et une des différences les plus importantes concerne le Québec à cause des raisons que vous l'avez mentionnées. Même, il y a une flexibilité accrue ici au Québec à travers d'autres provinces, y compris Alberta, par exemple, ou dans l'Ouest. Il y avait des choses que les gouvernements peuvent faire toujours, d'augmenter la flexibilité du marché du travail canadien. Oui, c'est vrai, mais quand on observe, point final, quand on observe la flexibilité du marché du travail ici au Québec par rapport aux marchés du travail européens, c'est bien cru ici, c'est supérieur ici et c'est un des avantages de notre fédération.
Nirmala Menon from Wall Street Journal. Governor, it seems to me that the drumbeat of concern about the Canadian housing market is increasing, has been increasing. And I'm just wondering, is there something going on there that maybe we're not aware of, maybe in the broader market, the non-insured market maybe? And a follow-up to that, given the misses that the Bank of Canada, that you've had on the bank's forecast, are you perhaps underestimating the decline in the housing market?
Well, in terms of the housing market, I sort of going to reject your premise on the first point. Look, there is a coordinated effort. There has been for a long time. You may be getting tired of hearing about it, but there's nothing new here. There's a coordinated effort between OSFI, the Bank of Canada, the Government of Canada, CMHC, and the more enlightened bits of the banking sector and private sector to ensure that there's an orderly and constructive evolution of household debt in the Canadian housing market, which is exactly what we're seeing. Now, it's an evolution. It's not finished, but it is certainly moving in the right direction. And we would say that what we have seen in the housing market has been consistent with our expectations. We had expected housing starts to go below household formation demographic demand, which we peg at about 185,000 per year. And we have expected, and we have been saying this for some time, that the contribution of residential investment as a proportion of GDP would come down from near record highs. That's central to our forecast, and we are seeing a path that is consistent with that. To bring it back to the broader issues in terms of the Canadian economy, of course, what that creates is a need for different sources of growth to crowd in so that the economy can grow at similar rates to in the past, and that's why we have talked of rotation.
Yes. Bonjour, Monsieur Carney. Éric Desrosiers, journaliste au Devoir. vous vous demandiez dans le discours, avons-nous vraiment fait le maximum, compte tenu du contexte économique mondial dans lequel on se trouve? Et vous identifiez 3 domaines dans lesquels on pourrait concentrer nos efforts. J'aimerais ça vous reposer cette question-là. Avez-vous l'impression que le Canada a fait le maximum pour essayer de générer la croissance dans le contexte mondial qu'on connaît?
Well, je voudrais vous répondre en 2 manières. En ce qui concerne la politique macroéconomique, c'est-à-dire la politique de stabilisation, politique budgétaire ou politique monétaire, oui, on fait face à la crise avec des stimulus massifs et rapides. Mais en ce qui concerne les politiques et les efforts d'augmenter le taux de croissance potentiel, d'augmenter la productivité de nos sociétés, de notre économie et d'ouvrir des marchés, des nouveaux marchés pour des produits canadiens. Non, nous avons encore beaucoup à faire. Et ça, c'était le point de la dernière phrase du discours. C'est le moment de bâtir. Alors, nous avons beaucoup d'initiatives en train et il faut les finir et il faut bâtir sur cette fondation.
Et ces initiatives-là, excusez, j'ai plus mon...
Je peux répondre.
Ces initiatives-là, donc vous dites qu'ils sont en cours. Est-ce qu'elles sont suffisantes? Si on réussit à les mener à bien, c'est suffisant. Quoi d'autre pourrait-on ajouter en plus de mener à bien les initiatives en cours?
Oui, il y a d'autres affaires. Il y a d'autres choses on peut faire d'augmenter, par exemple, la flexibilité du marché du travail canadien. Il y a d'autres initiatives on peut faire. Il y a des conversations ici à Montréal cette semaine, des conversations sur comment augmenter la commercialisation des innovations. Oui, il y a plusieurs choses que nous pouvons faire. On peut pas arrêter. Nous sommes dans une cour globale, une cour de compétitivité globale, et on peut pas arrêter. Mais nous avons de la chance ici au Canada, ici au Québec, parce que ce n'est pas le moment, c'est pas nécessaire d'ici de réparer des choses. On peut bâtir. Et ça c'est une occasion qui est presque unique pour le Canada parmi les pays avancés. Okay.
Hi, Mr. Carney. Jessica Rubinger from CBC News.
Hi.
Looking back at your time as Governor of the Banque du Canada, would you say Canada is better off since you took the job?
I think that, as I just said to Mr. Desrosiers, that we find ourselves in a position where we are in a stronger relative position than other advanced economies than when I started, not because of my efforts, helped by the Bank of Canada efforts, but by the efforts of many. We're in a stronger relative position compared to other advanced economies today than we were in 2008, but we're in a tougher world. Okay. The key thing that I was trying to explain today was why did we do better than others? That's interesting. But the more fundamental point, which is that because we've done better, we don't have to repair this economy. We have an opportunity to build, and we shouldn't. And I think we shouldn't rest on our laurels effectively. And this is a real opportunity to move forward, and it's our responsibility to seize it.
And just a second question, Mervyn King, the outgoing governor of the Bank of England, has come out publicly and said that job is not a one-man show. How would you respond to that?
Oh, he's absolutely right. Mervyn, as he is in all things, Mervyn is absolutely right. It's look, that institution has tremendous responsibilities. There are responsibilities in monetary policy, as the Bank of Canada does. It has responsibility in supervising banks and insurance companies, which is a responsibility in Canada for OSFI. And it has responsibility for macro-prudential policy, which in many cases is the direct responsibility of the Government of Canada. So it has tremendous responsibilities, but each of those responsibilities are discharged by committees, of which the Governor of the Bank of England is only one member. So Mervyn is, as I say, he's right in that, as he is in all things, and that is one of the strengths of the institutional setup there.
Is it going to be a different approach for you in the job, given that?
Il n'y a qu'une langue officielle en Angleterre, alors ça va être différent.
Mr. Carney, Nick Van Pratt from the
Et le
National
français me
Post.
manque. Là. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, Nick Van Pratt from the National Post. Can you talk about what you see as your personal legacy as Governor of the Bank of Canada? What have you personally left behind?
Well, I'm hoping not to leave behind a very messy office, so I have 10 days to end that. Look, I appreciate the question, but I really don't think one judges one's own. You shouldn't judge your own legacy, and particularly, as I think I've said before, for central bankers, you need time to see the legacy of the actions you've taken, because there are delays and lags in terms of how they come to pass. But most importantly, and it does slightly go to the previous question, which is that the Bank of Canada really, this is an institution. It's a team. It's not an individual. It's not an individual, and so these are very much decisions that are taken collectively.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, can you talk about what new options you might be considering in terms of additional monetary stimulus in your new job in the UK? Well,
I just go back to the previous answer. I mean, those decisions, any decision on monetary policy in the United Kingdom is taken by the Monetary Policy Committee, which just met and will meet again when I arrive at the start of July. So those decisions will be taken by that committee, and it'd be totally inappropriate for me to make any judgment on what those decisions could be.
Peter Haddicle from the Gazette, Montreal. When you look back on your time in office, it was really an unprecedented time in terms of financial crisis and the recession, and it was a pretty scary time for a lot of us. I'm just wondering what it was like for you to be serving during that period of time.
It was busy. It was a very intense period for a very long period of time. I think is the honest answer. That's the truth. In part because the difficulties that became apparent in the summer and certainly in the fall of 2008 had been there for a long time. Just like the difficulties to some extent in the Eurozone that became apparent, around a year and a half thereafter, had been there for a long time. And so there was a lot of work and worrying and efforts to try to address and strategize around those. So it was very intense. I will see in the fullness of time how rewarding it was. I think by and large the right decisions were made. And I think the other thing that was that I would take from it or recall was the tremendous sense of teamwork and bonds, both within the Bank of Canada and across central banks around the world in trying to address these very, very challenging set of circumstances.
And as a follow-up, would you say, do you have any confidence that the financial system is better insulated now and better protected to withstand another kind of shock like that?
I do. I wouldn't oversell it, but I would say that without question, the scale of capital has been increased, for example, substantially in the global financial system. You just take the Canadian system. Canadian banks, strongest banks in the world, shown during the crisis, but they've increased capital by more than 75%, more than $70 billion Canadian over the course of the last several years. dramatic increases in liquidity. We've changed the structure of a number of markets. A number of very risky products have been taken out of the market and addressed. You think of asset-backed commercial paper here in many people in that room. Actually, Monique Jerome Forget was there today, and we worked very closely with her as Minister of Finance to address that situation. So a number of things have improved, but as I say, I wouldn't oversell it because there are two aspects. One is the global economy is in a weaker state, and then secondly, we're not finished. I mean, there is as much to do ahead on financial reform as there is, as has been done, which is one of, to slightly personalize it, is one of the reasons why the challenge of the Bank of England, the City of London, and in conjunction with the FSB work is I think, of intense interest and importance.
We've got about 5 minutes left.
Sorry.
So we've got Greg with the mic. Anyone else who hasn't asked a question yet, if you can just show of hands so I can see who's left. We've got, 4 left. Thank you. Go ahead, Greg.
Greg Quinn, Bloomberg News. Governor, you and your central banking peers are credited with helping keep the global economy out of the abyss through the crisis. But now the world's sort of in a period of slow growth. And rates are low. There's a lot of monetary stimulus in the system now. Are there limits to what even rock star central bankers can do to foster a global recovery?
Well, I don't know any. Look, there's a role for monetary policy, fiscal policy. Those roles vary depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the economy. There's certainly a role, as Monsieur de Rosier raised, for structural policy to increase the rate of productivity in economies, increase the potential rate of growth. All of these have to be brought to bear. I'm not going to get tagged into a limits of headline, though, so don't write that, okay? It depends on the circumstances. There are tools available if necessary, but they have to be appropriate to the objectives of the central bank and the realities of the forces on output and inflation in the various economies.
And specifically to Canada, your speech today mentions limits of a growth model from household spending and debt, and of course you focused extensively on structural policies. How much kick does Canada's recovery get now from monetary policy versus the other parts of the economic policy framework?
Well, the first thing is we're not in a recovery, we're in an expansion. We're well into an expansion, and I know that's hard to remember because it puts us in a relatively unique position, but it is important to remember that. The Canadian economy is expanding. We've more than recovered. I mean, it's been 2 years since we recovered all the lost output and lost employment. How important is monetary policy? There is considerable monetary policy stimulus in this that's being provided every day to this economy, and it is appropriate and necessary. Obviously, it has to be the judgment of the governing council of the bank if there's any adjustment to that, but it is important. It is important. We face major headwinds from abroad. You see our export performance, which is the worst ever, or the worst since the Second World War. Canadian export performance, a huge drag on where we could be if we were marking previous a sort of typical recovery. So those are one of the headwinds, and we have headwinds from the persistent strength of the Canadian dollar as well. We're well aware of that, and so we have to take all of that into account to calibrate what is considerable monetary policy stimulus. 1% interest rates with a well-functioning financial system that covers the entire country is a very stimulative monetary policy, but it's there for a reason.
Oui, Nathalie Babin-Gagnon de la Radio-Canada. Est-ce que vous êtes déçu de partir après avoir revu vos prévisions de croissance pour cette année à la baisse? Est-ce que ça ne se termine pas sur une petite note morose?
Non.
Vous n'êtes pas déçu?
C'est la réalité. C'est une prévision. C'est pas égal à une réalité. C'est une prévision encore. Non, il y a des facteurs temporaires qui influent les perspectives à court terme ici au Canada. Les données récentes sont plus positives. Les données récentes sont un peu plus positives que nous avons prévu dans l'RPM d'avril. Alors, mais la responsabilité de la Banque du Canada est de gérer la politique monétaire à moyen terme, pas à court terme, c'est évident.
Et également, comment va s'articuler la passation de pouvoir entre vous et votre successeur? Vous avez dit que vous étiez là pour une semaine, 10 jours. Il va y avoir une annonce sur le taux directeur le 29 mai. Comment ça va se passer entre vous et votre successeur?
Il va commencer M. Paulas, qui est un économiste très capable, un bon communicateur, un vrai leader des organisations. Il va commencer le 3 juin, le lundi le 3 juin, après la décision et la décision de la semaine prochaine. Alors, je vais présider comme gouverneur sur cette décision.
Oui, Chouane Femme à TVA. Vous avez dit que le défi pour le Canada, c'était de déplacer les sources de la croissance vers les exportations nettes et les investissements des entreprises. Est-ce que c'est le conseil que vous laissez à M. Paulos ou sinon, quel serait votre conseil à M. Paulos?
Comme je viens de dire, il est très capable. C'est pas nécessaire pour moi de lui offrir des conseils. En ce qui concerne les défis pour notre économie, oui, en général, c'est un des défis, cette rotation de croissance dans notre économie vers les exportations et l'investissement. C'est un défi qui existe depuis une année et demie environ, et ça va durer pour un certain temps.
Okay. Daniel, question?
Ross Marrs, Canadian Press. First of all, I'm wondering, as you look back, what do you think the best decision you made was in your tenure, and what was the biggest mistake?
You know what? I don't have answers to that. I'll give it to you in 5 years. I'll come back. I'll answer that question. I'm sorry. I don't mean to dodge it. I haven't spent a lot of time reflecting on my time here. I'm still in the end of my time here, and focused on doing my job. So, sorry.
And also, as you leave, what is your biggest fear about what Canada might face going forward?
Well, fear is strong. The concern is that the world has changed quite substantially. It was changing quite substantially over the last 20 years. The crisis accelerated it, that change. It is much more multipolar world. It's a world that our economy is less well oriented to the sources of global growth than we were in the past. And you can't change that overnight. It takes a sustained series of efforts by companies, by individuals, by all levels of government to reorient to what in the end will be a more resilient multipolar global economy. But we face a challenge, and I guess my concern, which is shared by many others, is that that's what we should focus on a daily basis. Is how are we going to be at the core of this new global economy, at the forefront of this new global economy. And I'll end by just reminding that we have a real advantage over other advanced economies in that we are not getting up every day and worried about how we're going to repair things in this economy, how we're going to get out of trouble, how we're going to fix things. No, it is about a forward-looking agenda, and that can be a very positive agenda, and we just have to make sure that it's oriented to the economy of tomorrow. I would say the economy of today, not the global economy of yesterday.
With that, thank you very much. Bon après-midi tout le monde. Have a nice afternoon.